Hello again and welcome to The Luxury of Choice, a B2B sales and business podcast brought to you by the training team of George James Limited. My name is Steve Vaughan. I'm a senior sales trainer at George James, as well as the host and producer of this podcast. And today I'm joined by my two colleagues, Prue Layton and Debbie Airey. So ladies, how are your weekends? Weekends. I always get that wrong. Prue, how was your weekend?
Steve, you said I wasn't allowed to mention the football, but I had a really good result
30
yesterday.
30 seconds in and you did that.
just for the listener, my team beat Steve's team yesterday, and it doesn't happen very often, so that was great. No, it was a good weekend, actually. We actually got out with the dogs yesterday in a local hall that we've never been round. It was really nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
So apart from the football, Debs, because we support the same team, how was your weekend?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Went to see some friends down in Brighton. So we did the park run at Peacehaven. And then I took the chance to don my swimming costume and go for a swim in Brighton Sea, which was a little bit chilly at this time of year, but I did it. I did it.
Rather you than me. Well, while you were doing that, I was probably crossing the same bit of sea or a bit further out because I was on my way back from Germany. I was in a show. I've been involved in a local show with Banbury Operatic Society, and we put it on in Banbury's twin town, Hennef, in Germany, which is quite close to Cologne. And we took everything over, put the show on, and it was a lot of fun. And then we, drove back and crossed the ferry. But I've decided I'm too old for that kind of stuff now, so that was my last ever performance on stage. But a lot of fun, and congratulations to everybody that was involved in the show. Anyway, let's move on to today's topic, which we've said we would look at, and that is the pros and cons of bringing business forward at year end. So let me just sort of put a bit more context on that before we get into the discussion. So we're recording this on the 4th of November, and for many companies, not all companies, but for many companies, they're coming into the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks of their financial year, really. And the pressure's usually on to make sure the numbers are as good as possible and to maximize, obviously, the sales figures, particularly if we're running a bit behind as a business or as individual sales teams. So often what we get asked at this time of the year, and I know I've asked salespeople to do this as well, is what can we find out of next year, out of Q1 next year? What could we bring forward? What could we, encourage customers to place or to accept business from us or products from us at the end of this year? So, Prue, is it something you've ever had to do in your time as a salesperson or as a sales manager?
I was trying to think of a time when I wasn't asked to do it. It's probably easier, in all honesty. Yeah, it's the machinations of business, really. Yeah. I think that I think pretty much every year end I've been asked to bring business forward, whether as a manager or whether as a salesperson. So yeah, have been asked frequently. Have I always responded the same? Probably not.
That's a good point. Yeah. How about you, Debbie? Something you've had to do as well? Yeah.
Yeah. Every single time. Yeah. And I always dread that question, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's lots of scenarios, I think, why this could happen. We could be because our business itself is behind, or as salespeople we're behind and we're trying to hit our targets. Or it could be another part of the business isn't doing quite so well and we're asked to compensate for that part of the business, I guess. Or even other parts of the team aren't doing as well and we're asked to compensate for the team. So what are the, let's assume first of all that we've been asked to do this, So what's the upside of doing it? So last time, Deb, I gave you all the negative stuff. So let me do you the positive stuff this time. So what would be the upside of bringing business forward from next year if we're in this scenario?
Well, if I was managing the team and someone was able to bring their business forward, I'd probably start to challenge the CRM. And it'd be a good time to do some housekeeping on the CRM. So is that as accurate as it should be?
That's a great point.
Really, because if you can bring it in now, perhaps those dates aren't quite right. So no, but that's there. Number two, I think it's just another way of keeping in contact with your customers. It's another conversation piece to have. You can spin the question, spin the conversation, so it doesn't feel quite so. Please, sir, can I have some more? Let's spin. You can spin it a little bit nicer than that. So yeah, two things there. It keeps the conversation going. and it is an opportunity to challenge that CRM data.
I love that point. I hadn't thought about that one, because it's a good chance, I suppose, to make sure our CRM funnels are clean and healthy, to use the phrase, by going and looking at what we can bring forward. Are we actually really up to date with what's on our system? That's a great point. So what's the flip side, Prue? So what's the dangers we can face here in bringing business forward?
The dangers are probably longer than the positives, to be honest.
I think so too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the danger of bringing business forward, if we're having managing a sales conversation with a customer and we've qualified it well and we understand when they need the solution by and why and all those kind of things, there's one clunky lever that we can use to bring business forward. And that clunky lever is generally price. If you think about it from a customer point of view, to actually get them to do whatever they need to do inside their own organisation to bring the order forward, the motivation is generally price. And that has such a big impact for so many reasons. It has a big impact to their view of how you behave when you've been having these conversations, which are all focused to something happening at a certain time, and then you change that conversation. And you're right, Debbie, you can spin it, but it doesn't feel comfortable, does it, spinning it?
No.
It makes me shudder thinking about some of the conversations I've had. To say, there's a legitimate reason for it. We have to do this. And if I was the customer and someone said to me, look, would there be any possibility I can, give you a better price for this if you could do that? As a customer, I'd be thinking, is that business all right? Are they
That's
okay?
a great point, actually.
Yeah. Well, why are they suddenly wanting this really quickly? I thought they were a financially stable, great business. So that has always concerned me. And maybe it's because I've never had those conversations with the belief that I have many other conversations with customers. They maybe feel my discomfort with those conversations. So I think you really do lose money, generally use margin.
Yeah, without doubt.
Doing it. There's very few other reasons to do it. I think, secondly, you may, without realising it, put some doubts in the customer's mind about the business's desperation and the reasons behind it. And that's quite a hard conversation to have.
Absolutely.
And then and I think, we've spoken about this as well. You can sometimes educate customers to wait. They know your behaviours because, between us, when we spoke about this, we all said, when were we not asked to do it? So customers are also not that daft, by the way. So they may also work out that, they have an opportunity or a negotiation tool to actually play the game with you. So
great points, Prue. So I guess what we're saying here, Debbie, is that we've almost got a bit of short-term gain, long-term pain almost by doing this, really.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, a phrase that I've used forever really is it makes you feel like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul by doing that, because you're just pulling your sales farm for the next quarter back in, but also what you are doing is eroding the end price as well, because if you're selling through distribution channels, that distributor is less likely to keep the extra margin that they're getting from that deal. They will pass that on to win business from other distributors. And therefore, all the work you've done throughout the year to try and maintain a healthy price and to maintain that price margin is just obliterated in the space of one conversation. Yeah. And then the distributors get annoyed with you as well, because one distributor will have a different price discount and etc. And it just spreads that message across. Everybody talks, let's face it. Yeah. So always remember those conversations you're going to have are probably going to get out.
Yeah, completely. And I think you made a great point as well, in that we should always think of this from the customer's perspective. The most important person in this conversation isn't on this podcast, and that's the customer. And, as you said, Prue, what are they going to think about us? But also, what's in it for them, really? I guess it does depend in terms of whether we're selling capital equipment, consumables, that kind of thing, really. But what does it mean to their business, their workflow, their stores, even if we're asking them to take a large amount of consumables? What's it mean for them, and what do they think of us, and what do they think of the organization that's asking them to do these kind of things? Thinking about my own experiences, a lot of the time when I was asked to do this wasn't my decision, and it wasn't even my boss's decision. This was coming from elsewhere in the organization, usually our finance team. And thinking about some of the large corporations I work for, and I won't name names, but you can look at my career history. We're being asked by another part of the business to do something to make the numbers look better for, the company, and ultimately, I guess, for our shareholders, really. And that's a difficult thing, Prue, to manage, because how do we, we've almost got to manage the internal dimension on that one as opposed to managing the external side of things for the customer. So how do we handle that?
I mean, I've pushed back, same as you, Steve. We've worked for some similar businesses. I've pushed back and said, genuinely, what do you think I should say as a more senior person in an organisation when I've had to share this message with my team and say, look, of course, I understand that, we all work for the same team, but, genuinely, what is the real reason behind this? Because if we are going to have some of these conversations, I'd like them to have some honesty about them and some transparency about the conversation. But I think I think businesses get in the habit of doing it. As much as we all rolled our eyes when we weren't asked, I'm pretty sure somewhere in those fancy, deep, carpeted, walnut veneered boardrooms that I didn't live in, it's just they go, oh, look, it's that time of year, let's send this message out. It usually comes out with the same message that says no travel, by the way. So they tend to go hand in hand. So no one's allowed to travel anywhere. And by the way, can you bring some business forward? And I think businesses see it as a lever that they pull every year just to see what they can get. Right. Because the truth is, if I'm at the very top of the pile and I send this missive out and say, can you bring business forward? I mean, I heard phrases like gloves are off, which was the one that always made me just put my head in my hands. Gloves are off, bring everything in you can. I go, no, we've been spending years, we spent the whole year value selling, and now you're telling me, forget value selling, just bring business in.
Drop price left, right, centre. Yeah, that's point, really.
I'm sure it's like a kind of, it's a habit, and if they get a good response and they get a really good finish to their year or their quarter, why wouldn't they do it again? So I think it's pretty habit forming in our business because it does bring the results.
And it's self-defeating in many ways, Deb, isn't it, really? Because, come the 1st of January, new year, we've still got to sell something. We're still going to have a target. It's going to be bigger than this year's, by the way. And we're going to start the year with a diminished funnel, or even in some cases even an emptied funnel, but we've still got to sell stuff. So guess what? At the end of Q1, we're going to be doing the same thing again, aren't we? What can we bring forward from next quarter? Because this quarter isn't looking great. So how do we get out of that trap? Yeah,
don't do it. It's a really just don't do it. Push back, don't do it. For me, it's never been the right decision to make with the businesses that I've been in. Because, the products don't always last on the shelves anyway. They have, a shelf life, a certain shelf life. So if you're filling a distributor or a customer with products that are effectively going to die, you're just moving the problem onto them, and that your reputation is destroyed. So, no, I just think don't do it, because, come the new financial year, be it January, be it anywhere, it's just an absolute nightmare to try and bring that business in. And your salespeople are exhausted as well, because they've had to go out and deliver a message that's against possibly their core values. But I just think that going back to the customer journey, which is always paramount, you're not sending out the right message of longevity in that relationship. And it just erodes the whole view of your business and your business's company values as well. By doing that. So, yeah, don't do it, in short. In my opinion, my personal humble opinion.
I think we all agree with that. See, sometimes we don't have the choice, of course, but I think if we can avoid, in all seriousness, if we can avoid having to do it, I think the benefits are obvious in terms of the next quarter, the next year. However, sometimes we don't have that luxury. We have to just, do what we're asked to do. But what alternatives could we have then? So instead of saying, well, I'm going to try and bring business forward from next quarter, but we've still got to make this quarter look better than we are now. What other things could we do, Prue? Are there any things we could do in terms of our current business, things that we are expected to bring in this quarter? Is there any way we can make that better?
Make sure you do it. So get your forecasting right, you know. I think, you know, make sure that, you know, what we are aware of is that final quarter forecast is probably the most important because that really seals your year. So be really vigilant about whatever contribution, wherever you're making that contribution in the business, to be really, really good at that end of year forecast, because so many other things actually pivot off of that. Your next year's target, for instance, will pivot off where you exit Q4.
Funny,
so, you know, be aware of that. So be extra vigilant and extra careful. I think I was trying to think when we were all talking about, you know, we're a bit, we've had a few years of this, but maybe some of our listeners who are listening, it may be their first, second or third year in terms of being asked to do this. And I don't want to sort of say, you know, well, there's no point, because sometimes there is. And I think, you know, I was trying to think about situations that I was in. And it may be a particularly price sensitive deal where you've not been able to close the customer because of the pricing policies that your business have. And if there is that message that goes out to say, hey, you know, we're willing to be a lot more flexible in price to exit the year very well, you could probably look and see some opportunities coming up where you could have a more positive and realistic conversation. I mean, where you always knew that this was going to be a price sensitive deal. So being selective about the deals that you look at and say, right, well, in that instance, this gives me a competitive advantage, which I didn't have before. So what you don't want to do is go and use it on the deals where you have maybe loyal customers who buy from you a lot. It's those deals that are going to be tough to win. And use this opportunity, see it as an opportunity that the business is giving you to say, you know, look, actually, I may have a chance to close this sooner, but look, Mr. Customer, you know, this is really out with our normal pricing policy. So you have to trade with me because I'm not offering this to everybody. I'm just offering it to you. However, you need to commit to get this. You know, is there a possibility that you can speed this up and we can get the order in?
I think that's
and it's even more complicated, to be honest, Steve, if you're actually recognised on terms of bookings or whether you're recognised in terms of revenue. And it makes it even harder because if it's on revenue recognition, you have to ship the thing and invoice it. So.
The year might be done already. In that case, if it's high value capital equipment, it's too late to do anything anyway, really. Yeah. But so I think that's a super point, Debs. I'd like to explore that with you a bit more, really. So instead of how can we almost distort the flow, or will we distort the flow of business we're going to get anyway by doing this? But instead of that, could we use this, to use the phrase we hate, gloves are off mentality, to go and win some additional business that perhaps we didn't think we were going to win? That's another way of looking at it, isn't it? Yeah.
You can. If you're working on, for example, large projects, complex sales, engineering systems, for example, then yes, you can use it to pull in other accessories, for example.
Yeah, super.
You can look to the additional products. What you can't do with larger complex engineering things is essentially, it's not the price that person is looking at. It's the whole, it's a build of a system. It's going into something else. It might be part of their building works that isn't quite ready yet. So you can't push those conversations. They will happen when they will be, they will be scheduled in effectively far more detailed than a normal CRM. So that's where it becomes a bit more complex. However, as you quite rightly say, you can then explore other elements of that sale and use that time to go out there and look at the accessories or the additional products or additional service packages that people could sign up to as well in and around that deal. So there is always something to explore. there is always the what else question that should be done at that point.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. I think it's not, to go back to what you said, Prue, about the importance of value selling, and we've been encouraging value selling throughout the whole year. Now, potentially, we're giving the message that says that doesn't matter anymore. I don't think we necessarily have to do that. I think we can go to the customer and say, we've got an opportunity to give you more value over a limited period of time. So we could give you, some additional service. We could give you, as you say, an accessory, auto sampler or whatever, but it is time limited. And that also might just work from a customer's perspective, because sometimes they have a bit of year-end budget, don't they? They have a bit of money left over where, if they don't spend it, they lose it. So, they might be thinking, and this is where we need to be very close to our customers. They might be thinking, well, I've got a few K left over here. What can I spend that on? And if we're, close enough to the customers to say, it's a time-limited offer, but I could give you an additional year service. I could give you an accessory. Have you got the budget available to that? That just might be another way of getting more revenue, or at least more bookings. And I take your point, Prue, about bookings and invoice sales in this quarter rather than in the next quarter. So, Prue, Debbie, we've had a good discussion about some things that we could do and the pros and cons of bringing business forward. Anything else we haven't thought about, Debbie? Anything else we could do here in terms of trying to get ourselves out of this need that the company clearly does want from us?
Yeah, for sure. If you're selling equipment or safety systems that are going into sites that need a qualified person to be monitoring and maintaining that equipment, then there's always the training that goes with it and the training packages. So the training packages could be, not necessarily the actual package could be pulled forward, but they could be paid for in advance as well. And there's negotiations that can be done around them, because they're areas where you can negotiate on price and be a little more keen on it without losing too much margin. So I think that's always a good option to take.
So I guess this is where we're training our customers on how to use the products, or I should say from a safety point of view. And I guess often, Prue, that might come from a different budget completely. So there might be more scope for the customer to find some money there for that kind of opportunity.
There could be maybe some things that they've always wanted and they've never thought about it, because as much as it's your year end, it often coincides with customers' year end.
Yeah.
So there's the opportunity to open things up, I think, perhaps, and have a more positive approach than perhaps we've shared over the last few minutes, about seeing it as an opportunity for you to go and broaden the discussion and not necessarily focus on just the thing that was in your pipeline, to look a bit broader and take a broader view. But I was thinking, really, make sure that when you hear that message, gloves are off was the classic one. And I know, Steve, you've got the same message. Gloves are off, and you know what that meant.
If you're a sales manager, listen to this. Please don't say that to your sales team, yeah?
It's just like, whoa. It was very much that the folk understand what they're asking you to do. Don't make an assumption. Wherever you are in the business, totally understand when they say, can you bring business forward into this quarter? Make sure that you have the confidence to say, when you say bring business forward, can I understand what business it is that you want? Mm-hmm. Because if you go out and sell, get commitment to additional service packages or training packages or whatever it is, and the business go, oh no, that wasn't the sort of business that we wanted, then, really understand what's being asked of you. I think, to make sure that you're actually doing the right thing. If you sell service packages that are for a longer time, you get the commitment, but you can't recognize that money until you deliver the service.
That's really important.
So you can get a 5-year service deal, but you can only recognize it in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So it may not be that's what you're being asked to do.
Really?
I also think, understand that you are going to be asked to do this probably every year. So perhaps as you build your pipeline, perhaps as you look at, I'm going to be asked to do this, start to shape those conversations where, if and when you are asked, that you can have a more positive discussion with a customer, knowing it's likely to happen. Manage the expectations on you as well. I mean, most businesses will incentivize you to do it. So recognize that there's a high chance that you're going to be incentivized.
Good point. Yeah.
The truth is, the people they ask are the people that are doing well. I was much more likely to be pushed hard when I was having a great year than when I was having a bad year, in all honesty, because there's momentum in the business. So just because you're ahead of the game or you're doing well, don't think it doesn't apply to you. Most businesses will put additional pressure and perhaps a reason for you to do it on you. And if you are doing that, if you are engaging in pulling business forward, then what are you doing to fill that pipeline for next year so that you don't wake up on the 1st of January and look at your, which of course is the first thing you do on the 1st of January, I know. You open up your sales pipeline, have a look. Think about ahead of time what you're doing to fill that so that you don't have a really terrible start.
My birthday's on the 4th of January, so my birthday present usually was a new sales target. Happy birthday, Steve. Here's your new number. It's bigger than last year. And that's a really important point, Deb. So while we're running around frantically trying to make this year look as good as possible, we've got to find the time to prospect still, haven't we? We're still going to be... Yeah.
Always have your strategy time in the diary. That's definitely what I would always say. Always have that in there. Always do always be prospecting. I think it's something Jonathan hammered home actually when I first joined. Always be selling, always be prospecting, and prospecting is selling, and vice versa. And it's exactly the truth. Always be doing it. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. Always make time to do it. And I think these days there's a lot more avenues to do it as well, because you've got LinkedIn. I think networking groups are starting to spark up again now. There's so many different things to do. It's not always just about sending the odd email, which I know we've done on the podcast.
We're going to come back and look at it again, I'm sure.
I will come back at that. But definitely always, because you're right, that funnel is, it's going to happen at the end of the year. So the next month you're going to have to open that sales funnel and see what's in there.
Yeah, great point. And if you want to know more about how to prospect, we have covered this in previous podcasts, but also our colleague Jane Green and I did a LinkedIn Live on this a couple of weeks ago, which is still on our LinkedIn page, I think, about great ways to prospect. So go and check that out if you haven't already seen it. So one final point from both of you on this sort of year-end pros and cons of bringing things forward. Any final thoughts from you, Prue, about what people should think about when they're asked to do this?
I think if I'd listened to myself when I was younger, I think going with a positive mental attitude, the likelihood is that you're going to be asked to do it. There's reasons that the business wants it to happen. So I think really understanding exactly what it is that's being asked of you, to actually go in and cherry pick those opportunities where the time factor or the price factor or the added value factor would really make the difference, and don't spoil the really good deals that you were going to get at a good price, if you like. Be really selective about the opportunities that you apply this to.
Good advice. And Debbie, one final point from you on this?
Really, to echo what Prue just said there about the customer journey version of it, just think about those conversations and how they're going to hit with the customer. And if it's a distributor, think how they're going to hit with the customer's customer, and the message that's going out to your competitors as well when you're doing this.
Good point. Yeah. We haven't mentioned those guys, have we?
And they're always there. Yeah, so think about how that's going to look.
Great point. Yeah, and the chances are they maybe has to be doing the same thing as well, but that's another conversation.
Of course.
So thank you both, Debs and Prue, for your thoughts on the pros and cons of bringing business forward. If you are asked to do that, dear listener, at this time of year, I wish you the best with it and the best with your year end. I'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time with another podcast. We are looking at bringing back some guest interviews. So we won't be doing interviews every couple of weeks like we did in our previous series, but we are looking at what we're going to call bonus episodes, where we're going to have thought leaders and interesting people on the show as a kind of a infrequent, but every 3 or 4 weeks perhaps have a guest interview. And Debbie and I are going to have a conversation about that tomorrow, in fact, aren't we? So stay tuned for more information on that. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app, subscribe to the show, and you'll make sure you get the show coming into your inbox every time we bring it out. And please give us a review on Spotify or Apple. It does help us in lots of strange ways. As I said, I'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, happy selling, and we'll talk to you soon.